My 15-year-old daughter uses a wheelchair. She was sitting on our front porch enjoying the warm sun. She likes to watch the kids play and see neighbors walk their dogs. It was a quiet Saturday morning. Then Karen from the HOA walked up the steps without asking. She shouted, "No wheelchairs on porches. It looks bad and breaks the rules," my daughter said softly. "I'm just sitting here. I'm not hurting anyone." Karen got very angry. She marched over to the wheelchair and pushed it hard toward the edge. My daughter dropped down the steps. She cried out and tried to grab something. Her scared eyes looked for help. Karen stood on the porch and smiled. Now the porch looks nice and clean. She looked proud of herself. She did not know the strong man running out from the fire station next door was my daughter's father, a fire department chief, just back from a long shift. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from, and please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. The morning sun spilled across the front porch, warming the wooden floorboards beneath Emily's wheelchair. At 15, she had learned to appreciate the small joys of life, and this Saturday morning was perfect. Birds chirped cheerfully in the trees, and the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint aroma of blooming flowers from the neighbor's garden. She leaned back slightly in her chair, letting the sunlight touch her face, and watched the neighborhood awaken in its gentle rhythm. From her vantage point, Emily could see kids gathering at the corner of the street, laughing as they kicked a soccer ball back and forth. A dog barked nearby, tugging at its leash as its owner jogged along the sidewalk. She waved at both, enjoying the simple connection. These mornings, calm and quiet, gave her a sense of freedom she cherished, a rare pause from the bustle of schoolwork, therapy, and the constant navigation of a world not always built for her. Emily's hands rested gently on the rims of her wheelchair, spinning them slightly now and then to maintain her position. She smiled as she caught sight of Mrs. Patel tending to her tulips, waving in greeting. Everything seemed ordinary, serene. Yet even in these peaceful moments, Emily had learned to notice the subtle tension that sometimes lingered around her. Today, that tension arrived abruptly. The sound of footsteps echoed up the porch stairs, sharp, deliberate, and uninvited. Emily turned her head slightly and saw Karen from the HOA striding toward her, the woman's expression a mixture of anger and rigid authority. Karen had a way of appearing suddenly, her presence loud and unwelcome, like a shadow that intruded into sunlight. "No wheelchairs on porches," Karen shouted, her voice cutting through the calm morning air. "It looks bad and breaks the rules." Emily's fingers tightened slightly on her chair's rims, but she remained calm, her voice soft and measured. "I'm just sitting here. I'm not hurting anyone." Karen's eyes narrowed, her mouth twisting into a frown. She stepped closer, looming over Emily, as if sheer intimidation could bend her to the rules. The porch, quiet just moments ago, now felt tense, suffused with hostility. Emily's heart began to pound, a cold knot forming in her stomach. She had faced criticism before, even unfair rules. But there was something about Karen's intensity today that set her on edge. Before Emily could react further, Karen marched over and shoved the wheelchair. The sudden force sent the chair teetering dangerously close to the edge of the porch steps. Emily gasped, her hands instinctively reaching out for something to grab, anything that could prevent a fall. The world seemed to tilt, the sunny morning spinning around her as the chair lurched forward. Time slowed in Emily's mind. Her eyes darted frantically, searching for help, for a hand, for any safe place to land. Her breath caught in her throat, and a frightened cry escaped her lips. "Help! Someone, please!" Karen, standing a step back, smiled cruelly. "Now the porch looks nice and clean," she said, her voice light and almost proud, as if the act of causing fear was a victory. She did not see the terror reflected in Emily's wide, scared eyes, nor did she comprehend the risk she had just imposed. Emily's wheelchair tipped, and the next few moments became a blur of motion and sound. Her body jolted with the fall, each impact sending a sharp shock of pain through her arms and torso. She flailed slightly, trying to grab the porch railing, anything that could break the fall, but the steps approached faster than she could react. From across the street, a door burst open. The heavy, authoritative footsteps of a tall man echoed down the sidewalk. It was her father, just back from a long shift at the fire station next door. His eyes widened as he saw the chair tilting perilously over the steps. Emily's terrified face turned toward him. Without a second thought, he sprinted, every muscle taut with urgency, arms reaching forward, his training and instinct guiding him with precision. Emily's mind focused solely on survival. The fall seemed endless, her senses heightened to the smallest details. The sharp edge of the steps, the splintered wood beneath her, the light of the sun bouncing off the railing. Her cries for help mingled with the rapid sound of her father's approach, a lifeline piercing the chaos. Karen's smile faltered as she noticed the man running toward the porch. For a moment, fear flickered in her eyes, though pride and stubbornness kept her rooted in place. She hadn't expected anyone to intervene so quickly. The chaos she had orchestrated was no longer under her control. With perfect timing, Emily's father reached the porch, his hands grasping the wheelchair firmly, halting its precarious motion just inches from disaster. Emily gasped, relief and shock washing over her as she realized she was safe. Her heart pounded rapidly, but the immediate terror dissolved into the strength and security of her father's presence. Karen, still standing on the porch, looked stunned. The satisfaction she had anticipated was gone, replaced with the uncomfortable recognition that she had overstepped, that her actions had nearly caused real harm. Emily, trembling slightly, leaned back in the chair, tears welling in her eyes. Her father's hands remained steady on the wheelchair, ensuring she was secure before relaxing slightly. The sun continued to shine, but the porch, once a haven of calm, had become a stage for fear, courage, and the first lesson of vigilance in Emily's young life. The quiet Saturday morning had transformed in an instant. What had begun as a calm day watching neighbors and children had erupted into a test of bravery, quick thinking, and parental protection. And as Emily's breathing slowly returned to normal, she realized that some lessons about courage, authority, and the consequences of cruelty could never be forgotten. The shrill cry that cut through the morning air made Michael's chest tighten instantly. He had been stepping out of the fire station after a long night on call, the weight of fatigue heavy on his shoulders, muscles still aching from the shift, when he heard the sharp, panicked shout. It wasn't the usual barking dog or the distant sound of a car horn. It was his daughter. Her voice, high and trembling with fear, carried over the street and pierced the calm Saturday morning like a warning bell. Michael's instincts, honed over decades of firefighting and emergency response, snapped him to attention in an instant. Fatigue disappeared, replaced by pure adrenaline and determination. He recognized the danger immediately. Emily's voice was desperate, a cry for help that could only mean she was in real peril. Without thinking, he sprinted toward the front porch of his home, his boots pounding the pavement, each stride purposeful and fast. The neighborhood, bathed in soft morning sunlight, had begun to stir. Children on bicycles paused mid-turn. Neighbors peeked out from windows and dogs barked anxiously, sensing the tension in the air. Michael barely registered them. His focus was singular, unyielding. Every step he took brought him closer to the edge of disaster, closer to his daughter teetering in the wheelchair at the mercy of someone else's cruelty. Across the porch, Karen's smug expression had not yet faltered. She was still standing rigidly, satisfied with the chaos she believed she had created. In her mind, she had imposed order, ensured the neighborhood rules were respected, and taught a lesson in obedience. She had not counted on anyone intervening, especially not someone fast enough, determined enough, and trained enough to stop the disaster before it happened. Michael's eyes widened as he saw Emily's wheelchair teetering on the edge of the porch steps. His stomach clenched. The chair tilted slightly, rocking with the smallest of movements, yet that movement was enough to send it, and his daughter plunging down the wooden steps. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching as he assessed the trajectory, the height of the fall, and the rapid approach of potential injury. "Hold on, Emily!" he shouted, his voice commanding but calm, carrying the authority of both a parent and a trained first responder. Emily's terrified eyes locked onto him. She flailed slightly, her hands gripping the rims of the chair, her body tense, trembling with fear. The morning sun glinted off the polished wood of the porch railing, and in that fleeting, suspended moment, she felt both the terror of impending harm and the hope sparked by her father's presence. Michael's stride was rapid and precise. Years of experience allowed him to move with perfect timing, each step calculated to maximize speed without sacrificing balance or control. He navigated the small obstacles on the front lawn, potted plants, uneven concrete, and the edge of the driveway, without breaking stride. Every fiber of his being focused on one goal: reach Emily before the chair tipped over the edge. Karen, still standing near the edge, finally registered a flicker of uncertainty. Her confident smile faltered as she noticed the tall figure racing toward the porch. Something she had not anticipated became immediately clear. The situation was no longer under her control. Panic, sudden and sharp, replaced the pride that had fueled her actions just moments ago. Emily's arms ached from gripping the rims, her knuckles white, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The rocking of the wheelchair made each second feel like an eternity. Her mind scrambled desperately for something to hold on to, some way to stop the fall, but the edge of the porch loomed too close, the wooden steps below too dangerous. She could only watch, wide-eyed, as her father closed the distance with astonishing speed. Michael reached the porch in one powerful burst, his hands shooting forward to grip the wheelchair just as it began to tip. His arms wrapped around the frame firmly, the strength of his grip steadying it instantly. The sudden controlled resistance halted the chair's precarious motion, transforming imminent disaster into relief in an instant. Emily gasped, a mixture of fear and elation rushing through her. "Dad," she whispered, voice shaking, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I've got you, Emily," he said calmly, though his own heart still raced. His hands were steady, his grip firm, and his presence radiated safety. The sun glinted off his uniform from the fire station, highlighting the authority and protection he brought in that single, decisive moment. Karen froze, her mouth opening slightly in SHOK. The victory she had imagined, the lesson she thought she was delivering, crumbled in an instant. Her eyes flicked between Michael's commanding presence and the safe, secure look on Emily's face. The pride she had felt evaporated entirely, replaced by disbelief and a flicker of fear. Emily leaned back in her wheelchair, her body trembling but stable, as her father adjusted the chair fully on the porch, ensuring she was secure. Her heart still pounded in her chest, the remnants of terror lingering like a shadow, but the overwhelming sense of safety provided by her father's presence began to replace it. The adrenaline ebbed slowly, leaving only the warmth of relief and gratitude. Around them, the neighborhood began to exhale collectively. The sounds of birds, distant traffic, and the occasional bark returned to the scene, mingling with quiet murmurs from neighbors who had witnessed the drama. Children peered from behind fence posts, learning a lesson in bravery, vigilance, and the sudden, profound impact of intervention. Karen, still rooted near the porch edge, finally stepped back, her face pale and her earlier confidence gone. She had underestimated the strength, skill, and instinct of a parent in action. She now understood, too late, that rules and appearances were no match for courage, love, and immediate action. Emily's father steadied her wheelchair, checking for any signs of injury, though relief washed over him as he realized she had escaped harm. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now. I've got you," he said again, softer this time, grounding her still frightened heart. The morning sunlight bathed the porch in warmth, but the calm of the day had been irrevocably altered. A quiet Saturday had become a test of courage, vigilance, and parental protection. Emily had learned firsthand the power of trust, the weight of danger, and the relief of a hero who was always near, even in the most terrifying moments. And as she took a deep, shuddering breath, the porch no longer felt like just a place to sit and watch the world. It was a place where safety, bravery, and love intersected in a single decisive moment that would never be forgotten. Emily sat on the porch, her body still trembling from the fall that had almost sent her crashing down the steps. Her hands gripped the rims of her wheelchair, though they no longer needed to prevent the fall. Her father's strong hands had already steadied her. Her chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath, the warmth of the morning sun now mixed with the cold shock of fear. She could barely process what had just happened, the terror of being shoved, the helplessness of teetering on the edge, and the sudden relief of being rescued. Michael stood beside her, hands resting lightly on the wheelchair, ensuring it remained stable. His posture radiated authority, calm yet commanding, a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted mere moments ago. His eyes, however, were not only protective, they were sharp, assessing, and filled with a quiet fire that warned anyone who dared to challenge the safety of his daughter. Karen, still on the porch, hesitated. Her earlier satisfaction, the smugness that had colored her every movement, had vanished in the instant Michael had intervened. She had expected compliance, perhaps even fear, but not this, a force stronger, faster, and far more intimidating than anything she had anticipated. Her hands twisted nervously at her sides, the small rituals she used to control others rendered useless in the face of authority. Michael's gaze met hers, unwavering, steady. "What do you think you're doing, Karen?" he asked, his voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of experience, authority, and protection. The words were not a threat, they didn't need to be. The intensity behind them was enough to make Karen falter, to make her reconsider the audacity of her actions. Karen opened her mouth, trying to muster a response. I was just enforcing the rules," she said, her tone tight and defensive. "The wheelchair shouldn't be on the porch. It looks bad. It violates neighborhood standards." Her words stumbled out, revealing a mix of fear and stubborn pride. She had rehearsed this speech in her mind countless times, yet now it sounded hollow, weak, and meaningless. Michael's lips pressed into a firm line. "You're not enforcing anything," he said slowly. "You're threatening a child. You pushed her. She could have been seriously hurt. Rules don't give anyone the right to endanger someone's safety, Karen. Do you understand that?" The weight of his words hung in the air, heavier than the warm sunlight. Karen's expression shifted. Shock, disbelief, and the first flickers of guilt crossed her face. She had never imagined that someone would intervene with such authority, and certainly not that her actions could be called out so plainly in front of witnesses. As if on cue, neighbors began to emerge from their homes. Drawn by the commotion, Mrs. Patel leaned against her gate, wide-eyed, clutching her teacup. Across the street, the twins, Ben and Lily, stood frozen by their bikes, staring at the scene with curiosity and alarm. Other neighbors peeked from windows or stepped onto their porches, murmuring to one another, their whispers a mixture of fear and disapproval. The crowd was small but growing, and its presence amplified Karen's sense of exposure and shame. Emily watched all of this unfold, still trembling but gaining a new sense of courage from her father's example. She had seen him act decisively to protect her in the moments of immediate danger, but now she saw him assert authority calmly, firmly, and without aggression. It was a lesson not just in safety, but in dignity. How to face someone who tried to intimidate you and make it clear that certain behavior would not be tolerated. Karen's face went pale as Michael continued. "You have no right to put a child in danger. Your obsession with appearances does not justify harming others. If you can't follow that simple principle, then you have no place enforcing anything in this neighborhood." His eyes held hers, unyielding, as if daring her to argue further. The murmurs from the neighbors grew louder, a chorus of support for Emily and disapproval toward Karen. Some nodded subtly, others shook their heads, all bearing witness to the confrontation. Karen's voice faltered as she attempted another defense, but Michael did not give her the space to continue. The authority of a parent protecting a child, combined with the visible support of the neighborhood, created a force she could not overcome. Emily felt a swell of pride and relief. Her father had protected her body, yes, but he had also protected her dignity. She realized that being in a wheelchair did not make her helpless, and that true strength often came from the presence of those who loved and defended you. Michael knelt slightly beside her, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're okay, Emily," he said gently, his voice softening after the firmness of confrontation. "I've got you." Karen, defeated, muttered something incoherent under her breath and retreated a step, finally moving back from the porch railing she had just used to intimidate Emily. The tension in her posture was unmistakable. The power she had tried to wield evaporated in the face of courage, authority, and community oversight. The sun continued to shine on the neighborhood, but the dynamics had shifted. What had begun as an ordinary Saturday morning had transformed into a defining moment, a lesson about respect. The boundaries of authority and the power of standing up, both for oneself and for those who cannot always defend themselves. Emily's hands rested gently on the rims of her wheelchair once more, no longer trembling as much. Her father's protective presence remained close, a tangible reassurance that she was safe. Around them, neighbors began to return to their routines, their expressions softened by relief but enlightened by what they had witnessed. And Karen? She lingered at the edge of the porch, humbled, chastened, and quietly reconsidering the rules she had once wielded like a weapon. The confrontation had ended, but its lessons about courage, protection, and the consequences of cruelty would linger far longer than any neighborhood ordinance ever could. The sharp adrenaline of the fall had begun to ebb, leaving Emily in a trembling haze. Her hands rested lightly on the rims of her wheelchair, though she no longer needed to grip them tightly. Her father, Michael, remained close, kneeling beside her, his hands firm on the chair to ensure stability. His presence radiated calm authority, a protective barrier that reassured Emily even as the echoes of fear still pulsed in her chest. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his voice steady, carrying concern without panic. Emily nodded, though her lips trembled. I think so," she whispered. The words were small, fragile, yet they held relief. The initial terror had passed, replaced with gratitude and the dawning realization that she had narrowly avoided serious harm. Her mind replayed the sequence of events, the shove, the fall, the rapid intervention of her father, and she felt a mix of awe and relief. Michael's eyes scanned her quickly but carefully, checking for any bruises or scrapes that might have gone unnoticed in the chaos. Let's make sure everything's okay, he said, running his hands along the wheelchair. King the wheels, brakes, and frame for stability. The chair had taken the fall but had survived intact, a small miracle given the angle and force of the shove. Emily watched him work, her own trembling hands relaxing as she realized her safety was no longer in doubt. Meanwhile, Karen had retreated to her home, her face pale, her earlier smugness replaced with flustered confusion. She stood in the doorway for a moment, uncertain whether to confront Michael or hide from the judgment she now knew would come. The neighbors who had witnessed the incident were still outside, whispering in quiet shock. The air carried their murmurings, concern for Emily, outrage at Karen's actions, and relief that the situation had been resolved without serious injury. From across the street, Mrs. Patel leaned over her fence, shaking her head. "I've never seen such recklessness," she muttered to a neighbor. The twins, Ben and Lily, exchanged wide-eyed glances, suddenly more aware that rules and authority didn't always align with safety. Children playing nearby began to whisper amongst themselves, recounting the drama they had witnessed. The neighborhood, for a brief moment, was alive with the realization that appearances mattered far less than well-being. Emily's father finally straightened, giving the chair a gentle push to ensure it moved smoothly. He looked down at his daughter with pride, not in a boastful way, but in the quiet, steady pride of someone who had ensured a loved one's safety. "You were very brave," he said softly. "Even when it was scary, you stayed calm enough to hold on. That took courage." Emily's eyes glistened with tears. I didn't know what to do," she admitted. "I just hoped you'd come." Michael smiled, a mixture of warmth and reassurance. "You did exactly what you needed to do. You stayed in the chair, kept control as best you could, and trusted that help was company. Ming, that's called resilience." He ruffled her hair gently, a small gesture of comfort in a world that had suddenly felt unsafe. Karen, from her home, tried to regain composure. She peeked from behind her curtains, hoping to salvage some dignity, but it was too late. The incident had already made its mark on the neighborhood. Whispers of disapproval had begun to spread. Her obsession with rules, her rigid enforcement, and her cruel overreach had been witnessed by several neighbors. What had been an attempt to assert control had instead exposed her recklessness and lack of judgment. Emily, observing this from the safety of her father's presence, felt a small surge of empowerment. For the first time in a long while, she realized that her voice, her safety, and her dignity mattered more than the arbitrary standards of someone like Karen. She felt the power of having a protector who not only valued her safety, but also respected her as a person. It was a lesson in self-advocacy and trust, knowing when to rely on others, but also understanding that she had the right to defend herself within her own capabilities. Neighbors began to slowly gather around, some cautiously approaching to offer comfort and support, others merely observing. Their presence, gentle but firm, signaled an unspoken alliance with Emily. They no longer saw the wheelchair as an eyesore, but as part of the neighborhood's fabric, a symbol of both her independence and the community's need to protect its vulnerable members. Whispers of support floated through the street. "She's lucky to have her dad. That woman went too far. I'm glad he was here in time." Emily's father finally released the wheelchair's frame, stepping back but remaining close enough to intervene if necessary. "Remember this," he said softly, looking into her eyes. "There will always be people who try to control you unfairly or make rules that aren't fair, but you have the right to protect yourself, to seek help, and to stand strong. And remember, there are people who will protect you if you need it." Emily nodded, absorbing the words, her small fingers brushing the rims of her wheelchair. The fear of moments ago was fading, replaced by a sense of empowerment. She realized that resilience wasn't just about holding on physically. It was about standing tall emotionally, understanding her worth, and trusting those who loved her. Karen retreated entirely, her authority diminished, and her presence now a cautionary example rather than a source of intimidation. The neighborhood, once quietly passive, began to shift. Conversations turned to Emily's bravery and the necessity of protecting each other rather than obsessing over appearances. The lesson was clear: vigilance, kindness, and community mattered far more than rules enforced without regard for human safety. As Emily leaned back on the porch, the morning sun warm on her face, she understood something important. She had survived danger, felt the courage to hold on, and witnessed authority wielded wisely. She had learned lessons that extended far beyond the porch, beyond Karen's pettiness, and into the very fabric of how she viewed safety, community, and herself. The quiet Saturday morning had returned in part, but its meaning had shifted. Emily's world was no longer just the sunlit porch and the playful neighborhood. It was a place where she could feel strong, protected, and respected. And as she rolled gently along the porch, surrounded by the quiet support of neighbors and the steadfast presence of her father, she knew that the lessons of the morning would stay with her forever. The calm that had returned to the neighborhood after the porch incident was fragile. Whispers of the morning's chaos had already spread, carried along fences, sidewalks, and doctor driveways. Neighbors spoke quietly among themselves, recounting the events with a mixture of disbelief and relief. By mid-morning, several residents had gathered in small clusters, sharing their shock at Karen's actions. It seemed impossible to many that someone could be so reckless, so obsessed with rules that they would actually endanger a child. Inside the HOA office, the tension was palpable. The board had been informed of the incident, though the details were still being verified. Complaints had been filed almost immediately, and the board convened an emergency meeting to discuss the matter. Karen, normally confident and imperious, sat stiffly in the chair, her face pale and her lips pressed in a thin line. For the first time in years, she seemed genuinely uncertain. She had thought her authority was absolute, her interpretations of the rules unassailable. But now, faced with evidence of endangerment, public scrutiny, that certainty had evaporated. "Karen," said the HOA president, a tall woman with a calm but firm demeanor, "we've received multiple reports about this morning, eyewitness accounts, statements from neighbors, and even photographs of the incident. Can you explain your actions?" Karen opened her mouth, hesitated, and then stammered, I was just enforcing the rules. The wheelchair shouldn't have been on the porch. It's against our guidelines. I was only trying to what?" The president interrupted, her voice sharp. "Put a child in danger? Make her fall down the steps? Karen, rules are not more important than people's safety. Your actions this morning were reckless, illegal, and completely unacceptable." Karen shifted uncomfortably, glancing down at her hands as if they themselves had betrayed her. Her previous confidence was gone. The room was silent, except for the steady hum of the air conditioning, a quiet backdrop to the storm of consequences gathering around her. Meanwhile, outside, the neighbors had begun giving statements. Mrs. Patel, still clutching her gardening gloves, spoke first. "I saw the whole thing. Emily didn't deserve that. Rules don't justify hurting someone. It's a shame this had to happen." The twins, Ben and Lily, added their voices, timid but firm. It was scary, really scary, and it wasn't fair. Their small words carried the weight of truth, and the other neighbors nodded in agreement. Emily, watching from her porch, felt a surge of pride. These were people who had once just waved or nodded politely. Now they were standing beside her, speaking up for her safety and her dignity. By mid-afternoon, the HOA board reached a unanimous decision. Karen would be stripped of her position immediately, her authority revoked. She would also be required to issue a formal apology to Emily and her family, and she would be prohibited from taking any actions in the neighborhood that could compromise safety. The penalties were firm, clear, and unavoidable. Karen's face fell as she absorbed the consequences. She had imagined this incident as a minor infraction, perhaps a small reprimand at most. Instead, it had become a public reckoning. Her actions were no longer private, her intentions irrelevant, in the face of undeniable proof that she had endangered a child. The humiliation she felt was immediate and inescapable, a mirror reflecting the gravity of her misjudgment. Emily, seated safely on the porch with her father nearby, watched the scene unfold. A sense of empowerment began to bloom inside her. She realized that her fears had been justified, that danger had been real, and that justice had been served. The rules Karen had obsessed over so blindly now seemed trivial compared to the principles of safety, respect, and accountability. Emily had faced fear, been rescued, and witnessed a community uphold what was right. Michael placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "This is how the world works sometimes, Emily," he said. "People make mistakes, sometimes very dangerous ones, but there are systems, there are rules, and there are people who will make sure justice is done. Today, you saw that. You were brave, and now the consequences are real." Emily nodded, a quiet sense of satisfaction warming her chest. Karen had sought to dominate with fear, but she had failed. Emily had been supported, protected, and respected, and in that she found a new confidence. She felt a small but powerful shift inside her, a realization that courage and resilience, combined with the support of a loving family and a vigilant community, could overcome cruelty and recklessness. The neighbors, sensing the resolution, began to relax. Conversations softened into laughter and light chatter. Children resumed their play, more aware of safety but also inspired by Emily's courage. The street, once a stage for tension and fear, returned to the gentle rhythms of a Saturday morning. But for Emily, nothing would ever feel quite the same. She had learned lessons in bravery, justice, and the importance of standing up not with fists or anger, but with truth, resilience, and the support of those who care. Karen, now humiliated and powerless, retreated to her home. Her role as an authority figure had been stripped away, replaced with a lingering lesson in responsibility and the limits of control. Emily, on the other hand, had gained something far more enduring, a sense of empowerment, the reassurance that her safety mattered, and the confidence that justice could prevail when the right people stood up for what was right. By evening, the neighborhood was quiet once more, but the lesson of the day had left its mark. Emily rolled slowly along the porch, sunlight painting her face with warmth, and felt the steady presence of her father beside her. She realized that courage wasn't about never being afraid. It was about taking action, trusting those who protect you, and knowing that accountability could turn fear into justice. And in that understanding, Emily found a newfound strength she knew would carry her forward. The sun rose slowly over the quiet street, spilling golden light across the freshly trimmed lawns and the familiar houses that lined Emily's neighborhood. After the chaos of the porch incident and the confrontation that followed, the morning felt almost surreal in its calm. Birds sang softly, a gentle breeze swirled through the trees, and the hum of distant traffic created a steady rhythm that seemed to whisper reassurance. For Emily, this new day carried a weight different from the first ordinary Saturday mornings she had once cherished. Today she felt it with a deeper appreciation, a sense of victory, growth, and renewed confidence. Emily maneuvered her wheelchair onto the front porch, rolling carefully but with a newfound grace. The wood beneath her wheels felt the same, yet everything about the space seemed changed. She no longer saw it merely as a place to sit and watch the world. It was now a space where she had survived fear, witnessed courage, and experienced firsthand the power of protection and justice. Each gentle push forward carried her pride, a reminder of what she had endured and what she had overcome. Her father, Michael, stood nearby, his hands resting lightly on the railing. Even in his relaxed stance, there was an aura of vigilance, a quiet reminder that safety remained paramount. He watched Emily close, but not with the intensity of the previous day's panic. Instead, there was a soft, reassuring warmth in his gaze. He knew she had grown from this experience, that she had absorbed lessons in bravery, trust, and self-respect. "You're doing great," Michael said, his voice calm, grounding, and filled with encouragement. "Remember, you can enjoy the porch, the neighborhood, and the sun without fear. You've proven that you're strong, and you have people around you who will always protect you." Emily smiled, the warmth of her father's words sinking deep into her chest. "I feel different," she admitted softly, "not just because of what happened, but because I know I can handle it now. I can trust myself and the people who care about me." She looked across the street toward the neighbors who had gathered discreetly, offering quiet smiles and gentle nods. Their support had been unwavering, their presence a testament to the fact that courage and community could overcome cruelty. Karen's house remained silent in the distance. The woman who had caused so much fear and distress was now reduced to a cautionary example, a reminder of how obsession with rules and appearances could spiral into recklessness. Emily had watched her retreat, humiliated and chastened, understanding that Karen's power had never been true. Authority without empathy or regard for safety was empty, and her actions would now be remembered only as a lesson in what not to do. Emily rolled closer to the edge of the porch, letting the morning breeze brush her face. The memory of the shove, the terror of the fall, and the rush of her father's intervention all remained vivid, but the fear had been replaced by clarity. She understood the importance of speaking up, of trusting herself, and of recognizing who truly had her best interests at heart. Today was not just a day of relief, it was a day of learning, of grow, and of empowerment. Neighbors began to step out more confidently. Mrs. Patel waved from her gate. The twins, Ben and Lily, approached to chat with Emily, and other families offered small gestures of acknowledgement and encouragement. Their reactions were subtle yet powerful: smiles, quiet applause, gentle words of support. The community had witnessed bravery firsthand, and in doing so, they had also learned the importance of protection, accountability, and mutual respect. Michael rested a hand gently on Emily's shoulder. "You've learned something important," he said. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's how you act despite fear. And you've done that today. Never forget that. Emily nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. I won't, she replied. And I'll remember that there are people I can trust, people who will step in when I need them, and also that I can speak up for myself. Her hands rested on the wheelchair rims, a quiet reminder that independence and resilience could coexist with support and protection. The porch, once a place of ordinary mornings, had transformed into a symbol of growth. Emily's perspective had shifted. What had been a simple sunny spot for watching neighbors was now a place where courage, community, and justice converged. Each detail, the feel of the wheels on the boards, the warmth of sunlight, the laughter of children playing nearby, was imbued with the lessons she had learned. Karen's actions had left their mark, but not in the way she had intended. Instead of fear, there was empowerment. Instead of shame falling on Emily, it had landed on Karen, who now embodied the cautionary tale of cruelty, overreach, and the misuse of authority. Emily had survived, she had grown, and the neighborhood, once passive, had become more vigilant and protective. The morning continued in a gentle rhythm. Neighbors went about their routines, children laughed and played, dogs trotted along the sidewalks, and the sun continued to bathe the neighborhood in warmth. Yet for Emily, the day felt richer, layered with the understanding that her world was filled not only with danger, but with courage, care, and community. She rolled slowly across the porch, feeling each bump and groove beneath her wheels, savoring the security of the moment. The wind whispered through the trees, and she realized she was no longer just observing the world. She was part of it, active, empowered, and unafraid. And as Michael stood beside her, proud and protective, Emily knew this day would stay with her forever. The porch was still sunny, the neighborhood still calm, but the meaning of the morning had changed. It had become a testament to resilience, love, and the strength that comes from facing fear, learning lessons, and emerging stronger. Emily smiled, taking inch. Ye warm light and gentle breeze. For the first time in a long time, she felt fully at peace. She was safe, empowered, and ready to face whatever challenges might come next, with courage, dignity, and the unwavering support of those who loved her.